I walked into my brother Ryan's new apartment and immediately wished I had stayed home. After months of avoiding family gatherings, I finally forced myself to attend his housewarming party. 30 guests filled the modest living space, all admiring his two-bedroom rental in downtown Columbus, Ohio. The moment Ryan spotted me, his voice boomed across the room with that familiar, condescending tone I remembered from childhood. "Well, look who finally showed up. Not everyone can afford a two-bedroom apartment like this, right, Jack?" Laughter erupted from every corner. My parents, Thomas and Carol, beamed with pride while shooting disappointed glances in my direction. Just as the humiliation reached its peak, my Aunt Patricia stepped forward with a knowing smile that made my heart race. "Is that why you bought a 5-bedroom house last month?" Dead silence engulfed the entire room. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Every face in that cramped living room turned toward me, expression shifting from amusement to confusion. I could feel my pulse hammering against my collar as 30 pairs of eyes searched my face for answers I was not ready to give. You see, there was something my family did not know about me, something I had been carefully hiding for the past 2 years. While they assumed I was struggling as a software engineer in Seattle, barely making ends meet, the truth was completely different. I had not just been surviving out there. I had been thriving. 3 months ago, I sold my startup company for $2.8 million. The cybersecurity software we developed caught the attention of a major tech corporation, and they bought us out entirely. After taxes and splitting profits with my business partners, I walked away with enough money to completely change my life. But I had not told anyone in my family about this success. Why? Because 2 years earlier, I discovered something that shattered my trust in the people I loved most. During a surprise visit home for Christmas, I overheard my parents and Ryan discussing my life in their kitchen. They were laughing about my pathetic attempts to make it in tech, calling my career choices unrealistic and my social skills hopeless. My mother actually said, "Poor Jack just keeps trying so hard, but some people are not cut out for big dreams." That conversation changed everything. I realized my family saw me as their project case, their source of concern and pity. They loved talking about my struggles because it made them feel better about their own lives. So I stopped sharing good news. I kept my successes to myself. When my company started gaining traction, I said nothing. When we landed major contracts, I stayed quiet. When investors started circling, I told them I was still figuring things out. The move to Portland happened 3 weeks ago. I found a stunning 5-bedroom craftsman house in the Pearl District with hardwood floors, a gourmet kitchen, and a view of Mount Hood from the master bedroom. The asking price was $850,000, and I bought it outright with cash. No mortgage, no debt. Just a simple transfer from my investment account to the seller. The only person who knew about any of this was Aunt Patricia. She worked in real estate, and when I called her for advice about West Coast property values, she connected me with a colleague in Portland. Patricia helped coordinate the entire purchase from Ohio, handling inspections and paperwork, while I finished transitioning my business obligations in Seattle. She was the one person in my family I trusted with the truth, partly because she had always treated me like an adult, and partly because she had no interest in family gossip. Now, as Patricia stood in Ryan's living room with that satisfied smile, I realized she had come to this party specifically for this moment. She had been waiting for someone to make a comment about my supposed financial struggles so she could drop this bombshell. Ryan's face had drained of all color. His mouth opened and closed, like he was trying to form words that would not come. The party guests began murmuring among themselves, trying to process what they had just heard. My father cleared his throat loudly. "Patricia, what are you talking about? Jack lives in some tiny studio apartment in Seattle?" "Actually, Thomas, your son just purchased a beautiful home in Portland, Oregon. 5 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms original, 1920 hardwood throughout. I helped him with the transaction myself." Patricia's voice carried the authority of someone who knew exactly what she was talking about. My mother stepped forward, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Jack, is this some kind of joke? You can barely afford rent." The room erupted in whispers. I could hear fragments of conversations. 5 bedrooms? In Portland? How is that possible? Didn't he just graduate from college a few years ago? Ryan suddenly burst into laughter, but it sounded forced and desperate. "Come on, everyone. This is obviously some misunderstanding. Jack's probably house-sitting for someone or something. Right, Jack? You're not seriously trying to tell us you bought a house." Several guests turned back to look at me, waiting for confirmation or denial. I could see doubt creeping into their expressions. Maybe Ryan was right. Maybe this was too good to be true. Maybe quiet, awkward Jack could not possibly have achieved something this significant. But then I noticed something in Ryan's eyes. Behind the forced laughter and bravado, I saw panic. Real, genuine fear. And that was when I realized what was really happening here. My brother was not just embarrassed about being wrong. He was terrified that his own carefully constructed image might crumble if people started questioning the assumptions they made about both of us. Patricia reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "Would you like to see the listing photos? It's quite stunning." The climactic twist hit me like a physical blow. Ryan was not defending himself out of brotherly concern or family loyalty. He was protecting his own reputation. For years, his identity had been built on being the successful son, the one who had his life together, while his older brother struggled. If I was actually doing better than him, it would not just be surprising. It would completely rewrite the family narrative that had defined both of us for decades. I remained silent, watching my brother dig himself deeper into a hole, while 30 people witnessed every desperate word. The tension in Ryan's apartment had shifted from confusion to something far more uncomfortable. Family dynamics that had simmered beneath the surface for years were now exposed under the harsh light of public scrutiny. I watched as my parents moved closer to Ryan, creating a protective barrier around their golden child. My father straightened his shoulders and fixed me with the stern look I remembered from childhood disciplinary conversations. "Jack, I think you need to explain what's going on here. If you've made some kind of major financial decision without consulting your family, we need to discuss it." "Thomas, he's 32 years old," Patricia interjected. "He does not need permission to buy a house." "That's not the point," my mother snapped. "The point is that Jack has always been impulsive with money. Remember when he spent his entire savings on that computer programming course in college? Or when he moved to Seattle without a job lined up? We're concerned he's gotten himself into a situation he cannot handle." The words hit exactly where they were intended to land. Even now, even with proof of my success, they were still treating me like the irresponsible child who needed their guidance and correction. The familiar shame began creeping up my throat, that old feeling of being permanently disappointing, permanently not quite good enough. But something else rose alongside the shame: anger. Pure, clean anger at the realization that no amount of success would ever be enough to change how they saw me. "You want to know about impulsive financial decisions," I said quietly. "Let's talk about how you co-signed Ryan's car loan when he was 25 because he had maxed out 3 credit cards, or how you paid his security deposit for this apartment because his credit score was too low to qualify on his own." Ryan's face flushed red. "That's completely different, and you know it." "How is it different?" "Because I'm not pretending to be something I'm not. I'm not making up stories about houses I cannot afford." Several guests had started moving toward the kitchen and balcony, clearly uncomfortable with the family confrontation unfolding in front of them. But a core group remained too fascinated by the drama to look away. I recognized some of them from high school people who had watched our family dynamics play out for years. Patricia held up her phone, showing a photograph of a gorgeous craftsman house with a manicured front lawn and mountain views in the background. "This is Jack's new home," I took this picture myself during the final walkthrough last week. The photo passed from hand to hand, generating murmurs of appreciation and disbelief. It was undeniably beautiful, undeniably expensive, and undeniably real. "Where did you get the money for this, Jack?" my father demanded. "Because the last time we talked, you were working for some small company nobody had ever heard of." Some small company nobody had ever heard of. The phrase hung in the air, perfectly encapsulating everything wrong with our family dynamic. They had never bothered to research my work or understand my industry. They had simply decided it was not important enough to pay attention to. That small company was acquired by North Star Systems for 7 figures, I said. I was a co-founder. The silence that followed was different from the earlier confusion. This was stunned processing silence. The kind of quiet that comes when people's entire understanding of a situation gets flipped upside down. 7 figures, my mother repeated slowly. As in over $1 million? As in several $1,000,000? Ryan's girlfriend Amanda appeared at his elbow. She was a sweet girl who worked as a medical assistant at a local clinic, and she had always been kind to me during family gatherings. But now she looked troubled, her eyes darting between Ryan and me, with an expression I could not quite read. "Wait, Ryan, maybe we should just congratulate Jack and move on," she said softly. "This is supposed to be a party." But Ryan was beyond reasonable conversation. The careful image he had cultivated was cracking, and he was lashing out like a cornered animal. "You know what this is really about," he announced to the room. "Jack has always been jealous of me. Always. In high school, I was captain of the basketball team while he sat in his room playing video games. I had friends. I had girlfriends. I had a normal social life. So now he's trying to buy his way into being impressive because he never learned how to actually connect with people." The cruelty of the statement sucked the air out of the room. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, and I could see disapproval spreading across their faces. But Ryan was not done. "He's always been weird, always been antisocial. Our parents tried everything to help him fit in, but he just could not figure out how to be normal. So now he throws money around thinking it will make people respect him." I felt the familiar old pain of being reduced to my childhood struggles. Yes, I had been quieter than Ryan. Yes, I had struggled socially in high school. But I had grown up. I had built a career, developed friendships, created a life I was proud of. None of that seemed to matter to my family. Amanda stepped away from Ryan, her face pale. "Ryan, stop. Just stop." But the damage was accelerating beyond anyone's control. My parents, instead of defending me or asking Ryan to tone down his attack, nodded along as if he was making reasonable points. "Ryan has a point," my father said. "Jack, you've always struggled with social situations. Maybe this house purchase is just another way of trying to compensate for feeling inadequate." The psychological assessment from my own father felt like a slap. Here I was, having achieved more professional success than anyone in my family, and they were still analyzing me like a case study in dysfunction. That was when Amanda moved closer to me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jack, can I talk to you privately for a minute?" I followed her toward the small balcony, grateful for any escape from the hostile energy radiating from my family. "I need to tell you something," she said, glancing back to make sure Ryan could not hear us. "Something about Ryan that you should know." My stomach dropped. Amanda's expression was pained, like she was about to reveal something that would change everything. "This apartment is not his," she said quietly. "It belongs to his company. He's house sitting for an executive who's on assignment overseas for 6 months. Ryan lost his lease on his old place 2 months ago because he could not make rent, and his boss offered him this temporary arrangement." The climactic twist hit me with devastating clarity. My brother had been living a lie, creating an elaborate performance of success to hide his own financial struggles. The housewarming party was not celebrating his achievement. It was covering up his failure. "Amanda, why are you telling me this?" Her eyes filled with tears. Because I cannot watch him tear you apart to protect his own ego anymore. And because there are other things you need to know. Amanda glanced nervously through the sliding glass door to make sure Ryan was still occupied with defending himself to the remaining party guests. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. "These are from Ryan's credit card companies," she whispered. "He owes almost $30,000 across 4 cards. He borrowed money from 3 different friends to pay for tonight's party because he wanted everything to look perfect. Even the furniture you see in there is rented from a staging company." I stared at the phone screen, processing the magnitude of deception my brother had constructed. The leather couch everyone had been admiring, the sleek dining table, the expensive-looking artwork on the walls. All of it was temporary rented props in an elaborate theatrical production. How long has this been going on? About 8 months. He lost his job at the marketing firm last winter, but could not bring himself to tell your parents. He's been freelancing, picking up small projects here and there, but it's barely enough to cover basic expenses. When he couldn't make rent anymore, his current boss offered him this house-sitting arrangement. My mind raced through the implications. All those times Ryan had posted photos on social media from fancy restaurants, expensive events, weekend trips. All those stories he told about his successful marketing career and impressive client roster. Everything had been carefully constructed to maintain an illusion of prosperity. "Why are you telling me this, Amanda? You're supposed to be on his team." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Because what he's doing in there is wrong. Attacking your character to protect his own lies. And because I'm tired of being part of the deception." Through the glass door, I could see Ryan gesticulating wildly as he continued his character assassination. My parents hung on every word, nodding in agreement, as he painted me as emotionally unstable and financially irresponsible. "There's more, Jack. Your parents already know some of this." "Know what?" "They know about his job situation. Your sister Sarah told them months ago." The mention of Sarah sent a chill down my spine. My youngest sister worked as a customer service representative at First National Bank in Columbus, the same bank where I had maintained my checking account throughout college and my early career years. What does Sarah have to do with any of this? Amanda's expression became even more pained. "She's been monitoring your account activity for years, sharing information with your parents about your deposits, withdrawals, spending patterns. They've known about your financial struggles and successes long before you ever told them anything." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My own sister had been violating my privacy, sharing my personal financial information with my parents, treating my bank records like family entertainment. That's illegal. Bank employees cannot share customer information with unauthorized parties. I know, but Sarah justified it by saying she was worried about you, that she was just trying to keep your parents informed so they could help if you needed it. I leaned against the balcony railing, trying to absorb the full scope of my family's betrayal. For years, every financial decision I made had been scrutinized and discussed at family gatherings I was not even attending. They had been analyzing my grocery store purchases, my rent payments, my utility bills, forming opinions about my life based on data they had no right to access. So they knew when I was struggling with student loan payments after college. Yes. And they knew when I started making more money at the tech company. Yes. But they only got information from your old checking account. When you moved to Seattle and switched to a credit union out there, Sarah lost access. That's when they started assuming you were struggling again because they could not see your new income. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with sickening clarity. My family's assumptions about my financial situation were not based on anything I had told them. They were based on incomplete banking data from an account I barely used anymore. There's one more thing," Amanda said, her voice barely audible. "The reason your parents are so defensive of Ryan right now, they've been giving him money for months, helping him maintain this lifestyle, because they're embarrassed about having a son who can't support himself." "How much money?" I think it's around $15,000 so far. They paid his car insurance, his cell phone bill, even bought groceries for him several times. But they made him promise never to tell you because they did not want you to know they were playing favorites. The final piece of the picture snapped into focus. My parents were not just enabling Ryan's deception, they were financially invested in it. They had spent thousands of dollars propping up his fake success story, which meant admitting the truth would force them to confront their own poor judgment. Inside the apartment, I could hear Ryan's voice rising to a near shout. Jack has always been the problem child. Always making everything about himself, always trying to be the center of attention. Even tonight, he couldn't just let me have my moment without trying to upstage me. Several party guests were quietly gathering their belongings and heading for the door. Others were openly staring at the family drama with expressions of shock and secondhand embarrassment. My father's voice cut through the noise. We've tried to help Jack for years, but he's always been resistant to guidance. Some people just struggle with accepting their limitations. I felt Amanda's hand on my arm. Jack, there's something else you need to know. Something about your parents and Sarah. What about them? Sarah applied for a job at your company 3 months ago. She found out where you work through your LinkedIn profile and submitted an application for a customer service position. She didn't tell your parents because she wanted to surprise them, but she also didn't tell you because she was worried you might think she was stalking you. My heart stopped. Did she get the job? Yes. She starts next Monday. She's been planning to move to Portland to be closer to you, but she hasn't figured out how to explain it to your parents yet. The climactic twist was almost too much to process. In the middle of this family crisis, my sister was secretly planning to uproot her life and move across the country to work for my company. The sister who had been spying on my finances for years was about to become my colleague. I heard my phone buzzing with notifications. Through the sliding door, I could see that several party guests were now actively recording the confrontation on their phones. Ryan's public meltdown was being documented and would likely be shared across social media within hours. Amanda, I need to ask you something important. Are you okay? I mean, with everything that's happening with Ryan? She started crying again. No, Jack. I'm not okay at all. And there's one more thing I haven't told you. Something that's going to make everything even worse. Amanda's tears were falling freely now as she gripped the balcony railing. Inside the apartment, Ryan's voice had reached a crescendo of desperation as more guests quietly slipped out the front door. The party was disintegrating in real time, but my brother seemed oblivious to the social carnage he was creating. Jack, I'm pregnant, Amanda whispered. 3 months along. And Ryan wants me to get an abortion because he says he can't afford to support a family. The words hit me like a truck. I looked at this sweet, hard-working girl who had always treated me with kindness and realized she was trapped in a nightmare of deception and emotional manipulation. Have you told anyone else? Just my sister. Ryan made me promise not to tell your parents until he gets his financial situation sorted out. But it's been 3 months, and instead of getting better, everything is falling apart faster. Through the glass door, I watched Ryan pointing aggressively in my direction while my parents nodded in agreement. The three of them were constructing an alternative reality where I was the villain and they were the victims of my selfishness. He's been pressuring me for weeks, Amanda continued, saying that bringing a baby into the world when we're financially unstable would be irresponsible. But Jack, I want this baby. I'm 28 years old, I have a good job, and I've been saving money for years. I could support a child on my own if I had to. Does Ryan know you feel this way? I've tried to talk to him about it, but every conversation turns into a lecture about how I don't understand the financial realities of raising children. He keeps saying we need to be smart about our future. I felt rage building in my chest, not just at Ryan's selfishness, but at the entire toxic family dynamic that had created this situation. My parents were so invested in protecting their golden child that they were blind to his moral failures. Amanda, what do you want to do? I want to keep my baby and build a life with someone who actually wants to be a father. But I'm scared of what happens when I tell Ryan my final decision. Inside the apartment, the drama was reaching a boiling point. I could hear my father's voice rising as he defended Ryan's character assassinations. Jack has always struggled with mental health issues, Thomas announced to the remaining guests. He was hospitalized in high school for depression and anxiety. We're worried that sudden wealth might trigger another episode. The violation of sharing my private medical history with a room full of strangers was breathtaking. But it also revealed something crucial about my family's psychology. They were so desperate to maintain Ryan's image that they were willing to destroy mine completely. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Amanda, I want to show you something. She looked at the screen showing my account balance $1.4 million. This is after buying the house, after all moving expenses, after setting up investment accounts. I'm not wealthy enough to retire, but I'm secure enough to help people I care about. Her eyes widened. Jack, why are you showing me this? Because I want you to know that if you decide to keep your baby, you'll have support. Real support, not Ryan's manipulation and financial anxiety. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. That baby is going to be my niece or nephew, and I'm not going to let my brother's selfishness determine whether they get a chance at life. Amanda sobbed harder, but these were tears of relief rather than despair. Through the sliding door, I saw Sarah rushing into the apartment, still wearing her bank uniform from work. She surveyed the scene with growing horror as she realized what kind of family confrontation she had walked into. Ryan immediately pounced on her arrival. Sarah, thank God you're here. Maybe you can talk some sense into Jack. He's claiming he bought some mansion in Portland, but we all know he can barely pay rent. Sarah's face went pale as she looked around the room, seeing the cameras pointed in her direction, realizing that whatever she said next would be recorded and potentially shared online. Ryan, I need to tell you something, she said quietly. Something about Jack's finances. My heart began racing. This was it. The moment when my sister would have to choose between protecting her illegal privacy violations and telling the truth about my financial situation. What about his finances? My mother demanded. Sarah looked directly at me through the glass door, her expression filled with guilt and regret. Then she turned back to the room and made a choice that would change everything. Jack sold his company for almost $3 million 6 months ago. He's been one of our most successful customers for years, but I couldn't tell anyone because of banking privacy laws. The room erupted, Ryan's face contorted with rage. My parents looked like they had been slapped. The remaining guests stared at Sarah in shock. You've known this whole time? My father shouted. I've been watching his account activity for years, Sarah admitted. I know it was wrong, but I was worried about him, and I thought I was helping by keeping you informed. Ryan spun toward the balcony, his eyes blazing with fury. He yanked open the sliding door and stormed outside. You son of a bitch, he screamed. You've been sitting on millions of dollars while I've been struggling to pay rent, and you never thought to help your own brother? Amanda stepped between us. Ryan, stop it. Stay out of this, Amanda. This is family business. Actually, it's my business too, she said, her voice stronger than I had ever heard it. Because I'm pregnant with your baby, and you've been begging me to get an abortion because you're too broke to support a family. The climactic twist detonated like a bomb. Ryan's mouth fell open. My parents stared at Amanda in shock. Sarah gasped. The remaining party guests, who had been recording everything now, had footage of a pregnancy announcement made in the middle of a family war zone. You're what? My mother whispered. At 3 months pregnant, Amanda announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. And Ryan has been pressuring me to terminate the pregnancy because he's financially irresponsible and too proud to admit it. Ryan looked like he was about to explode. Amanda, you can't just announce that here. Why not you've spent the evening announcing all of Jack's private business? I figured it was time for some honesty. The apartment had gone completely silent, except for the sound of phones recording. My brother's house of cards was collapsing in the most public way possible, and everyone was watching it happen in real time. But the absolute worst was yet to come. Ryan's phone rang loudly in his pocket. He pulled it out, saw the caller ID, and his face went white. "Hello, Mr. Peterson," he answered, walking a few steps away. Even from the balcony, I could hear the voice on the other end. Loud, angry, professional. "Ryan, I just saw a video online of you claiming that our company apartment belongs to you. I need you to pack your belongings and vacate the property immediately. Your house sitting arrangement is terminated, and we'll be reviewing your employment status on Monday morning." Ryan dropped the phone. It clattered onto the hardwood floor as 30 people watched his entire life implode in real time. The silence following Ryan's phone call was deafening. Everyone in the apartment understood that they had just witnessed something irreversible. My brother stood frozen in the middle of his living room, staring at his fallen phone like it was a live grenade. But instead of feeling victorious, I felt something else entirely. Sadness. Deep, profound sadness for the broken family dynamics that had led us to this moment. I stepped back inside from the balcony, moving past Ryan toward Amanda. "Are you okay?" I asked her quietly. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I think so. Actually, I think this is the first time I've felt okay in months." I turned to address the entire room, my voice calm and steady despite the chaos surrounding us. "I want everyone to understand something important. I never wanted any of this to happen. I didn't come here tonight to embarrass Ryan or cause family drama. I came here because he's my brother, and I thought we could finally start building a better relationship." Ryan's head snapped up. "Don't you dare try to play the victim now." "Yeah, I'm not playing anything, Ryan. I'm just telling the truth." I pulled out my phone and opened my photo gallery. Here's the truth. I held up images of bank statements, the company acquisition documents, the deed to my house, screenshots of my investment portfolio. Everything Amanda had encouraged me to share, all the proof my family had demanded. I sold my cybersecurity company, CypherShield, to North Star Systems for $2.8 million 6 months ago. After taxes and splitting equity with my co-founders, I netted about $1.7 million. I used $500,000 to buy my house, outright put $1 million into diversified investments, and kept $200,000 in liquid savings. The remaining party guests stared at the documents I was showing them. Several people asked to see my phone more closely, and I handed it over without hesitation. "Holy shit," someone whispered. "This is all real." My father stepped forward, his face a mixture of confusion and something that looked almost like betrayal. "Jack, why didn't you tell us about any of this?" For the first time all evening, I looked directly at both my parents and spoke with complete honesty. "Because 2 years ago, I overheard you talking about me in your kitchen during Christmas. You called my career choices unrealistic and said I was not cut out for big dreams. You laughed about my pathetic attempts to make it in tech. So I decided to stop sharing my successes with people who had already decided I was a failure." My mother's face crumpled. "Jack, we never meant—" "Yes, you did mean it. And you know what? That's okay. It motivated me to prove you wrong. But more importantly, it taught me to build a life that doesn't depend on your approval." I turned to Sarah, who was standing near the kitchen looking mortified. "Sarah, I know about the banking surveillance. I know you've been sharing my financial information with Mom and Dad for years. I also know you got a job at my company, and you start on Monday." Her jaw dropped. "How do you know that?" "Because Amanda told me, and because I'm the one who recommended you for the position after HR sent me your application for review." The twist sent another shockwave through the room. Sarah stared at me with wide eyes. "You knew I applied." "I know everything that happens at my company, and I think you'd be great in customer service, which is why I told HR to fast-track your application. But I also think you need to understand that what you did with my banking information was illegal, and it damaged my trust in you." Sarah began crying. "Jack, I'm so sorry. I thought I was helping." I know you did, and I forgive you. But if you're going to work for my company and live in Portland, we need to establish some healthy boundaries." Ryan, who had been standing in stunned silence, suddenly erupted. "This is unbelievable. You people are all acting like Jack is some kind of saint when he's been lying to us for years. He could have helped me when I was struggling, but instead, he just watched me suffer." I turned to face my brother directly. "Ryan, you never asked for help. You spent every family conversation for the past 3 years telling me how much more successful you were than me. You mocked my career, my social skills, my life choices. When exactly was I supposed to offer you money? You should have known I needed it." How? By reading your mind? By violating your privacy, the way you've all been violating mine? Amanda stepped closer to me. "Jack, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Would you really help me with the baby, even if Ryan and I break up?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to every assumption my family had made about my character. "Amanda, you're a good person who's been caught in an impossible situation. Yes, I'll help you. I'll help with medical expenses, childcare costs, whatever you need to give that baby a healthy start in life. Even if it's not your responsibility. Family isn't just about blood relations. It's about who shows up when life gets complicated." Ryan's face twisted with rage. "You're trying to steal my girlfriend and my baby." "I'm offering to support a pregnant woman who's been pressured to have an abortion by someone who claims he can't afford to raise a child." "That's not what happened." "Then what did happen, Ryan? Explain to everyone here how you've been handling the pregnancy news." He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Around the room, party guests were exchanging glances that made it clear they understood exactly what kind of man Ryan was proving himself to be. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. I glanced at the screen and saw a number I recognized: my business attorney from Seattle. "I need to take this call," I announced to the room. "It might be important." I answered the phone on speaker, curious about why my lawyer would be calling on a Saturday evening. "Jack, I just got a call from a friend of mine who works in Columbus media. Apparently, there's video footage circulating online of you at some kind of family event. The footage shows banking documents and acquisition paperwork. I wanted to make sure you were okay and ask if you need any legal counsel." The climactic twist sent everyone in the room into overdrive. My family's private meltdown had already gone viral on social media. People were sharing videos of my financial documents, Ryan's public humiliation, Amanda's pregnancy announcement, and the revelation about my sister's banking violations. I looked around the room and realized that in the span of 2 hours, my family's carefully guarded secrets had become public entertainment for the entire internet. But instead of feeling embarrassed, I felt something unexpected: relief. For the first time in years, I didn't have to pretend to be anyone other than exactly who I was. The apartment had transformed into something resembling a disaster zone. Half the guests had fled, leaving behind empty cups and abandoned plates. The remaining people were glued to their phones, scrolling through social media to see how viral the footage had become. "There are already 3 different videos posted on TikTok," announced Marcus, one of Ryan's college friends. "The one with Amanda's pregnancy announcement has 50,000 views." Ryan sank onto his rented couch, his head in his hands. The call with his boss had been the final domino, but the social media exposure meant there was no possibility of containing the damage or crafting an alternative narrative. My father, who had spent the entire evening defending Ryan's character assassination attempts, finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of what had happened. "We need to call the family together for a private conversation," he announced. "Everyone else needs to leave." But it was too late for damage control. My Aunt Patricia, who had been observing the chaos with the satisfaction of someone whose predictions had come true, stepped forward with her own revelation. "Actually, Thomas, I think it's time for some additional honesty. Jack isn't the only family member with secrets." She pulled out her own phone and showed us a series of text messages. "These are from Carol from last month. She was asking me to help her find a second mortgage lender because she and Thomas have been borrowing against their house to to support Ryan's lifestyle. My mother's face went ashen. Patricia, you cannot share that information. Why not? You've spent 2 years sharing Jack's private information at every family gathering. Turnabout is fair play. The revelation hit like yet another earthquake. My parents had not just been giving Ryan money. They had been mortgaging their retirement security to fund his deception. How much money? I asked quietly. Patricia consulted her phone. $43,000 over the past 18 months. Car payments, rent assistance, credit card minimums, and party expenses. Ryan looked up from the couch, his face stricken. I didn't know they were borrowing against the house. Of course you didn't, Patricia replied. Because you never bothered to ask where the money was coming from. You just assumed your parents could afford to subsidize your pretend lifestyle indefinitely. Sarah, who had been standing near the kitchen in stunned silence, finally found her voice. Jack, I need to tell you something else. Something about why I really applied for the job at your company. All eyes turned to her. Even the remaining party guests leaned in to hear what other secrets might emerge. I applied because I wanted to get away from this family, away from all the lying and manipulation and financial drama. I've been watching everyone make terrible decisions for years, and I couldn't take it anymore. She looked directly at our parents. Mom, Dad, I love you, but you've been enabling Ryan's immaturity for so long that you've forgotten how to have honest relationships with any of your children. Thomas bristled. Sarah, that's completely inappropriate. No, what's inappropriate is monitoring Jack's bank account for years and then expressing shock when he achieves success. What's inappropriate is mortgaging your retirement to pay for Ryan's fake lifestyle. What's inappropriate is creating a family dynamic where the truth is treated as the enemy. Amanda, who had been standing near the sliding door, stepped into the center of the room. I need everyone to hear this, she announced. I'm keeping my baby with or without Ryan's support, and I'm moving out of the apartment we share effective immediately. Ryan jumped up from the couch. Amanda, you can't just make that decision unilaterally. Watch me. She turned to address me directly. Jack, I know this is going to sound presumptuous, but do you have any temporary housing available? I have money for rent. I just need somewhere safe to stay while I figure out my next steps. I didn't hesitate. I have a fully furnished studio apartment in the short north that I've been using as an Airbnb investment property. You can stay there as long as you need. I can pay market rate rent. We'll figure out the finances later. Right now, you just need a safe place to raise your baby. The offer seemed to break something in Ryan. He stood up and began pacing frantically around the living room. This is insane. My entire life is falling apart and my own family is celebrating it. Nobody's celebrating anything, I said, but people are recognizing that your problems are consequences of your choices, not random bad luck. Easy for you to say, you've been secretly rich while I've been struggling. Ryan, I've been successful because I worked 80-hour weeks for 3 years, building a company from scratch. You've been struggling because you spent money you didn't have to maintain an image that wasn't real. My phone rang again. This time it was my business partner from Seattle. Jack, I hate to bother you on the weekend, but we're getting calls from journalists who want to interview the mysterious tech millionaire whose family drama went viral. I think you might need to consider hiring a PR firm. The climactic twist was almost too surreal to process. In the span of a few hours, I had gone from being my family's disappointing underachiever to being a minor internet celebrity. I looked around Ryan's apartment, taking inventory of the wreckage. My brother had lost his job and his housing in a single phone call. Amanda was leaving him and taking their unborn child. My parents had mortgaged their house to support his lies. Sarah was planning to move across the country to escape the family dysfunction. But instead of feeling victorious, I felt something more complex. Relief, yes, but also grief for the relationships we might have had if we'd been honest with each other from the beginning. I want to make something clear to everyone in this room, I announced. Despite everything that's happened tonight, you're still my family. That means something to me even when we're at our worst. I turned to Ryan. You can stay in my studio apartment with Amanda if you want. Separate bedrooms, but you'd both have a safe place to figure out your next steps. He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Why would you offer me anything after the way I've treated you? Because you're my brother, and because everybody deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes and build a better life. Ryan began crying. Not angry tears or frustrated tears, but the deep body-shaking sobs of someone whose entire identity had just collapsed. I don't know how to be anything other than who I've been pretending to be, he whispered. For the first time all evening, I moved toward him and put my hand on his shoulder. Then it's time to find out who you actually are. 6 months later, I was standing in my Portland kitchen making coffee when my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Baby Emma said Uncle Jack this morning. Well, it sounded more like Unca Ja, but we're counting it. I smiled, remembering the scared pregnant girl who had courageously stood up to my entire family in that chaotic apartment. Amanda had kept her baby and thrived as a single mother, though she was hardly raising Emma alone. The support network we'd built around her included me, Sarah, and surprisingly, Ryan. My brother had spent the first month after the party in what he called his rock bottom phase. He moved into my studio apartment, started seeing a therapist, and got a job as a server at a downtown Columbus restaurant. The work was humbling, but it was honest. For the first time in years, Ryan was earning money instead of borrowing it, and he was learning to find pride in simple accomplishments. The hardest part, he had told me during one of our weekly phone calls, was admitting that I'd built my entire identity around being the successful brother. When that fell apart, I had no idea who I actually was. The therapy had been transformative. Ryan was learning to separate his self-worth from external validation to find satisfaction in authentic relationships rather than impressive appearances. He was also learning to be a father. I see Emma 3 times a week, he had explained during his last visit to Portland. Amanda and I are never getting back together romantically, but we're becoming good co-parents. She's teaching me how to be responsible for someone other than myself. Amanda had flourished in ways that surprised everyone, including herself. After spending years managing Ryan's financial anxieties, she discovered she was actually gifted at money management. She'd started a small bookkeeping business for local medical practices and was making more money than she'd ever earned as a medical assistant. I used to think I needed Ryan to feel secure, she had told me recently. But it turns out I just needed to stop subsidizing his insecurity. She was living in a small 2-bedroom house she'd bought with help from my down payment loan, though she insisted on paying market rate interest, and had already made several early payments toward the principal. My sister Sarah had become one of my closest confidants. Moving to Portland had allowed her to escape the family dynamics that had shaped her entire adult life, and she was discovering parts of herself that had been buried under years of people-pleasing and conflict avoidance. I spent so much time being the family spy that I forgot I could just be myself. She'd reflected during a hiking trip we'd taken the previous weekend. Living 3,000 miles away from everyone's drama is incredibly freeing. She was excelling in her customer service role at my company, but more importantly, she was developing genuine friendships with colleagues who knew nothing about our family history. For the first time in her life, she was being appreciated for who she was rather than what information she could provide. The most complicated relationships to rebuild had been with my parents. My father, Thomas, had struggled enormously with accepting that his assumptions about both his sons had been completely wrong. The revelation that he'd mortgaged his retirement to support Ryan's lies had forced him into his own version of therapy. I had to confront the fact that I was playing favorites. He'd admitted during a difficult conversation we'd had over Christmas. And worse, I was enabling Ryan's worst impulses while discouraging your best ones. My mother, Carol, had been more receptive to change, perhaps because she'd recognized her own patterns in Ryan's desperate need for external validation. I spent so much time worrying about how our family looked to other people that I forgot to pay attention to how we actually treated each other. She'd told me during her first visit to Portland. They were both working to repair their finances and their relationships. I'd offered to help with the second mortgage payments, but they declined, saying they needed to take responsibility for their own choices. I respected that decision, though. I'd quietly established a college fund for baby Emma that they could access if they ever faced a genuine emergency. The viral internet fame had faded within a few weeks, though it had generated some unexpected opportunities. A publisher had reached out about writing a book about family dynamics and financial deception. A podcast network wanted me to host a show about entrepreneurship and family relationships. Several speaking bureaus had offered lucrative contracts for corporate events. I'd turned down most of the opportunities, keeping only a few speaking engagements that aligned with my values and allowed me to share lessons about healthy family communication and authentic success. The house in Portland had become exactly what I'd hoped it would be: a gathering place for people I cared about. Amanda and Emma visited monthly. Sarah came over for dinner twice a week. Even Ryan had started making regular trips to Portland, staying in the guest room while he explored graduate school options. "This feels like what family is supposed to be," Sarah had said during Emma's first birthday party, which we'd celebrated in my backyard, with a small group of people who genuinely cared about each other. Ryan had been the one to propose a toast that day. "To my brother Jack, who taught me that real success isn't about impressing people you don't respect. It's about building a life with people who know the real you and love you anyway." As I sat in my kitchen now reading Amanda's text about Emma's first words, I reflected on the journey that had brought us all to this point. The night of Ryan's housewarming party had been devastating, but it had also been necessary. Sometimes families have to completely fall apart before they can rebuild on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. I'd learned that success without authenticity is exhausting, but authenticity without boundaries is dangerous. The key was finding people who deserved access to your real self and protecting that gift from those who would misuse it. My family had earned their way back into my life not through apologies alone, but through consistent changes in behavior over months of difficult conversations and uncomfortable growth. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened it to find a delivery driver holding a package addressed to Uncle Jack. Inside was a photo album Amanda had created documenting Emma's first 6 months of life. The inscription read, "For the uncle who taught us all what family really means. Thank you for showing us that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up when it matters most." As I flipped through pages of photos showing Emma with various family members, Ryan reading her bedtime stories, Sarah teaching her to clap, my parents visiting for her baptism, I realized we had created something neither perfect nor traditional, but genuine and resilient. The last page contained a photo from Emma's baptism showing all of us together in my Portland backyard. We were laughing at something silly Emma had done. Our faces relaxed and natural, no one performing for anyone else. Below the photo, Amanda had written, "This is what healing looks like." I couldn't argue with that assessment. I want to ask all of you something that's been on my mind as I've shared this story. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your family's assumptions about you were completely wrong? Maybe they underestimated your potential, or maybe they had expectations that didn't match who you really are. How did you handle that gap between their perception and your reality? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, because I think a lot of us struggle with family dynamics that don't reflect our true selves. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help other people who might be dealing with similar family challenges find it. And if you want to hear more stories about overcoming family obstacles and building authentic relationships, consider subscribing to stay connected with this community. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is share our experiences and realize we're not alone in these complicated family journeys. Finally, if you know someone who's dealing with family members who don't see their worth or potential, please share this story with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that other people's limitations in seeing our value don't define our actual worth. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of a community where we can talk honestly about the messy, complicated, beautiful process of building genuine relationships with the people we love. I hope whatever family challenges you're facing, you find the courage to stay true to yourself while keeping your heart open to growth and healing. Take care and remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to recognize it.